Well, I'm not going to get all the way through with just one video, although that took forever to upload. Hopefully, I'm going to have better success today. Anyway, back to that image, the image of the hatred. That one drop of hatred spreads like a drop of ink in milk, in white milk. I love how this metaphor connects to the finances of this family. It's just a little small characterization detail because this is a family where money does play a role, and a lack of money plays a role, especially with the narrator in terms of what the narrator wants to do with her life when she's a young girl, and the means they have, the means they don't have, and that she thinks that's a great image. Like, if you really drop black ink in white milk, would that does it all get discolored? I'm gonna test that out, but she can't because they can't afford that. So it's a nice way of connecting that metaphor to the literal, in a sense. All these things I remember, all these things I know, have been told about people I never even saw. I was named Euphema after my mother's mother. So there we get that overlap. Again, it's about the grandmother. Terrible name. And so she called herself Fame after a while. My husband, Dan Casey, called me Fame. Then in a bar, the Shamrock Hotel, years later after my divorce, when I was going out, a man said to me, Fame, I've been meaning to ask you just, what are you famous for? I don't know. Well, it's just for wasting my time talking to jerks like you. After that, I thought of changing altogether to something like Joan, but unless I moved away from here, how could I do that? What a powerful, that's just a little side room, a closet even, to this house of a story, but it's so powerful in this idea of like how we're sort of trapped in these, never leave a town, you're sort of trapped being who you are, being who you've always been, even when it comes down to something like a name. You can't just change it, or it's very, very hard to. In summer 1947, and this is where the meat, I would say, of the story takes place. When I was 12, I helped my mother paper the downstairs bedroom, the spare room, and this paper will be seen throughout the story in a very, very great way. This is back when people actually did wallpaper. Thank God we've moved on from that and hopefully never go back. But her mom, the narrator's aunt is, God, this is where I start to get things screwed up. Yes, the narrator's aunt is coming to visit in 1947 when she's 12. So her mother's mother, or her mother's sister, damn it, was coming to visit. These two sisters hadn't seen each other for years. Now, again, you start to piece together these items that we're collecting in the different rooms of the house. So the mom got baptized after her mom died when she was 14. She wouldn't, she couldn't get rid of any money. She wouldn't spend any money until she paid back her dad for everything he'd spent on her after her mom died. We know that she let herself go white haired because she didn't even want to have the same hair color as her father. Now we see that these sisters haven't seen each other in a long time. So some pieces are starting to come together. And then sort of spelled out for us here. The two sisters hadn't seen each other for years. Very soon after the mother died, father married again. He went to live in Minneapolis and Seattle with his new wife and Beryl, the younger daughter. My mother wouldn't go with him. She stayed on the town of Ramsey. Sorry, I've got this guy too. She boarded with a childless couple who'd been neighbors. She and Beryl met only once or twice since they were grown up. Beryl lived in California. So since her dad and Beryl had moved to Minnesota, she has maybe seen her a handful of times. So this is a reunion of sorts. Paper had a design of cornflowers on white ground. Mother had got it at a reduced price because it was the end of a lot. This meant we had a lot of trouble matching the pattern. This is just great specific detail about what it takes to match patterns on wallpaper. And then she sings a song that her own mother used to sing when she and Beryl were little girls. The narrator is excited as a 12-year-old for Beryl to be coming from California because this narrator has a longing, a real longing to get out of this town, to get educated, to get a job, to be able to move on. But she doesn't have the means. You can go to school till 8th grade at this point, and after that, you have to board in town if you're going to do that. Parents didn't have the money for her to do that. Payments from the cheese factory, but all that came in regularly, and I don't think any of my life going that direction. They have cows. didn't think my life going in that direction, the high school direction. They thought I should stay home and help my mother. So after 8th grade, our narrator is destined to stay at home and help, even though she really wants to learn. She wants this education. She wants to get out. They said, basically, you're there until you get married. That was why they were waiting to tell me. That was what they were waiting to tell me when I got the results of my examinations. Her examinations tell her that she's able to get into high school, and as long as she can go pay for it, I mean, she has to pay for it to stay, in the city. She can go. But you would think my mother might have a different idea, since she'd been a school teacher herself. But she said God didn't care. God isn't interested in what kind of job, what kind of education anybody has. She told me He doesn't care two hoots about that. That's what He cares about. That matters. All right, Manny, I need to get out of here too. This is the first time I understand how God could be a real opponent, not just kind of a nuisance or a large decoration. So God has sort of stood in her way as her mom has thrown Him there. My mother's name as a child was Marietta. That continued to be her name, of course, until Beryl came. I never heard her called by it. Father always called her mother. I had a childless notion. I knew it was childless that mother suited mother better than it did any other mother's mother, not mama. When I was away from her, I could not think what my mother's face was like, and this frightened me. Sitting in school just over hill from home, I tried to picture my mother's face. Sometimes I couldn't do it. Marietta, in my mind, was separate, not swallowed up in my mother's grown-up body. Marietta was still running around loose up in the town of Ramsey. So, we've talked about this before too. Our young selves being swallowed up by our old selves, and this narrator is having a hard time reckoning with that idea that that her mom could have had this other life. She only sees her in this one way, and it's really hard for her to see otherwise. We see this, we've already seen this a little bit with Miles City, Montana. This idea that it's hard to picture adults having their own sort of autonomy, or your parents having their own sort of autonomy and life without you. So in her mind, in the narrator's mind, Marietta is still this child. The house Marietta lived in was halfway up the street, climbing from the river. It was a double house. Now again, this is the grandmother's house. Wait, this is the mother's house as a child. Okay, Marietta is her mother. The other half of the house lived with Sutcliffe's people Marietta was to board with after the mother died and the father left town. Miss Sutcliffe was an Englishman, telegraph operator. His wife was German. Miss Sutcliffe was the one who talked Marietta's mother out of hanging herself. And this becomes the introduction to the most, I don't want to say the most important scene, but the longest scene and sort of the most impactful in terms of plot, if you could call it that, where the narrator's mother, as a little girl, before her mom had died, had walked in on her mom in a barn, and the way it looked, the mom had a rope around her neck and was ready to hang herself. And she called to her to go. The mom called to Marietta to go get her father. So you have this just incredible sequence where Marietta, the narrator's mom, as a child, is just this panic girl. She has to run through all these very, very frightening things to a child, especially a young girl, through the railway tracks, these workmen men, the dirt, the grime. She couldn't find the father. The men sort of laughed at her. Finally, she gets back, and the mom's not there in the barn. And after sort of having this moment of panic, Miss Sutcliffe finds her, takes her to the kitchen, and her mom's there. Everything's fine. But my God, it's pure terror for her for a good bit. And Beryl doesn't really even know what's going on. You see Beryl is eating a cookie, so she's very, very young. So later on, when Beryl says she knows really what happened, we have to call that into suspicion too. Hold on one second. Penny, can you come get Manny? I'm in my den. Come on. You keep a hold of him? Thank you, baby. All right. Okay. So you met both my cats. Let's see. Where am I now? Okay, she ran through. Okay, so we find out there's something, we never find out really what it is either, but there's something seriously wrong in the relationship between the narrator's grandmother and grandfather. And we know that the grandmother ends up dying early. That's what leaves the narrator's mom sort of on her own at 14. Her heart was broken. That's what I always heard my mother say. That was the end of it. Those words lifted up the story, sealed it shut. I never asked who broke it. I never asked what was the men's poison talk, what was the meaning of the word vile. Marieta's mother laughed after not hanging herself. She sat at Miss Sutcliffe's kitchen table long ago and laughed. Her heart was broken. I had a feeling when my mother's talking stories of something swelling out behind like a cloud you couldn't see through or get to the end of. There was a cloud of poison that had touched my mother's life. And when I grieved my mother, I became a part of it. What a powerful statement, and really just an extension on what we've seen with the power of storytelling with Tim O'Brien, how it sort of envelops us as well. Aunt Beryl shows up then. We get back to that sort of through line, 1947. She brought a gentleman with her, Mr. Florence. He usually just stays out in his car and smokes. He's happy to join Beryl apparently. His favorite place to be in the car was in the car though. He was a Royal Blue Chrysler. He was smoking it. The narrator's both enchanted and sort of disappointed by Beryl, because Beryl comes from California and she just expects, something more, something wise. And when Beryl doesn't know these sort of simple things that the narrator takes for granted, like where the ice comes from in the barn, or like milking a cow, and these sorts of things, she becomes a little bit disappointment by it. There's a funny line whenever the narrator's at 12 is like milking the cow and like shooting it into the cat's mouth, and Beryl says something, doesn't that hurt? Think if it was you. I never thought of a cow's teat as corresponding to any part of myself, and I was shaken by this indecency. In fact, I could never grasp a worn, warty teat in such a firm, casual way again. Beryl slept in a peach color. So we get, we see Beryl. We also see these layers that we put on. This is again connected to Revolutionary Road with layer upon layer. Here it's the house. We have the wallpaper. We have the house turning into something else eventually. We see Beryl here at night with the cream on the skin, the nighttime habits, how we make who we are. Beryl's asking, are there wild animals outside? Like bears or whatever? And she's like, wow, what if Mr. Florence ran into a bear? Finally, or not finally, but we still got quite a bit to go. But so on Sunday, Beryl and Mr. Florence drove my brothers and me to Sunday school in the Chrysler. That was at 10. And they brought the parents to church at 11. And then Beryl and Mr. Florence takes the boys and the narrator for a drive. I think they dropped the boys off at a neighbor's house, and they pick up when they pick up the parents. They're going to take them out to dinner. What is the place called? The Wildwood Inn. Okay, so another example of sort of a building becoming something else, sort of transforming while keeping the original memory in place. Finally, a white frame building appeared with verandas, potted flowers, and some twinkling poplar trees in front. The Wildwood Inn. Today, the same building is covered with stucco and done up to the Tudor beams called the Hideaway. The poplar trees have been cut down for a parking lot. On the way back to church to pick up my parents, Mr. Florence turned in the farm next to ours, drop off the boys, and they pick up. So it's the narrator, it's Aunt Beryl and Mr. Florence, and they pick up the parents, and said we're gonna go to dinner. Father's like one of those great people who's like understands like his position in life and sort of jokes his way around it, and maybe not necessarily for his own sake, but for other people's and his orbit's sake. He sort of takes the brunt of the joke. Well, now, said my father, he probably didn't have $5 in his pocket. Well, now, I wonder, do they let farmers in? He made various jokes along this line about, what do I do? What do I do with this big hat, with this big napkin? Of course, he'd eaten in hotel dining rooms before. He knew about table napkins and pie forks. And my mother knew. She wasn't even a country woman to begin with. Nevertheless, this was a huge event. So he's sort of putting on an act, and you wonder why people do that sometimes. I mean, sometimes there's sort of a safety that comes with some sense of irony. I don't know. You just get the sense that he's pretty affable. He's a pretty affable guy. You wonder how much he's doing this to almost even protect his wife and his daughter from feeling out of place at this fancy restaurant when they never go to places like this. So they order, and some talk comes up about the mother, and Beryl brings it up. She's talking about Mr. Florence. Now my dog's in here arguing with the cat. You notice how he keeps a straight face? It reminds me of Mama. This is Beryl talking. I mean our Mama. Marietta's in mine. Daddy, when he made a joke, you could see it coming a mile away. He couldn't keep it all straight. But Mama's another story. She could look so sour. She could even joke on her deathbed. In fact, she did that very thing. Marietta, remember when she was in bed in the front room the spring before she died? I remember she was in that room. Now, that's a nice distinction there, because Beryl's memory and Beryl's reality and Beryl's truth, she sees her mom as someone who's sort of in on the joke or joking. And the mother, Marietta, certainly doesn't see it that way because of what she saw with the noose, because of maybe other things she saw because of her experience. So she remembers her being in that bed, but she doesn't necessarily remember her joking. Daddy came in and she was lying there in her clean nightgown with the covers off because the German lady from next door had just been helping her take a wash. She was tidying up the bed. Daddy wanted to be cheerful, so he said, "Spring must be coming. I saw a crow today." This must have been March. And Mama said she was quick as a shot, just as quick as a shot. Well, better cover me up then before it looks in that window and gets any ideas. Mom was just skin and bone. She was dying, but she could joke. Might as well when there's no use to cry, is what Mr. Florence said. But she could carry a joke too far. And this is what transitions into the moment that has shaped Marietta walking in on that barn. And as Beryl has it, it was purely a joke. It was a prank, right? She was pranking the father, and certainly Marietta doesn't remember it this way. She did, and then Beryl says she meant it to get a rise out of Daddy. That was her whole life together. He was always a hard woman to live with. He always said she was a hard woman to live with, but she had a lot of character. I believe he missed that with Gladys. I wouldn't know, my mother said, in that particularly steady voice, what he did or didn't say. People are dead now, said my father. It isn't up to us to judge. So it gets tense there. Her dad, the narrator's dad, tries to sort of back him out of the situation. I know, said Beryl. I know Marietta's always had a different view. My mother looked at Mr. Florence and smiled quite easily and radiantly. I'm sure you don't know what to make all these family matters. Anyway, so they leave, and now we have this insight by the narrator. And this to me is the joy of being able to teach something like the things they carried first, which to me is, it has those complexities of what it means for something to be true, happening truth versus story truth. This adds to me, this stories like Munro's add even another layer to it that complicates it, while at the same time sort of illuminating for us just how complex it is to tell a story. Because it's like with the O'Brien stuff, for the most part, it was O'Brien dealing with happening truth and story truth, like sort of himself. Even whenever there were other characters, it was Tim sort of wrestling with it. It wasn't like he saw the sweetheart of the song, Trey Bong, and Rat did too, and they both had different experiences. What this does is it shows that, that may be true. What Tim O'Brien's saying may be true about happening truth and story truth. But at the same time, there's countless other peoples that it's happening with as well, who who have a different perspective on it. Now, I tend to be of the opinion with this story that Marietta, she's the older child. I think, and we do see that Beryl was very, very young when that happened, and Beryl went on to live with the father, so she's going to be influenced by how he tells the story as well. I do think there's something to be said for Marietta's version of the story, but this does open the narrator's eyes to the fact that, oh wait, there's two different things. So, you always hear that, oh, there's two sides to every story, and I always, even at a young age, it seemed like there wasn't enough for me. It seems like maybe there's more than that. But let's just say that there's two sides to every story. Just within our own story, there's like the happening truth and there's story truth. But then if somebody's in that same place, like, that means there's four, right? There's their happening truth and their story truth. And then if there's another person there, there's six. And so it's like, who else was there when Kurt Lemon got blown up? So Tim has this whole thing in How to Tell a True War Story, where he has sort of he reconciles the happening truth, or the happening truth, which is just one moment, with the story truth, which becomes 7 different realities. Here, it just sort of shows that exponentially expands. One of the things I think of when I think of something like this is like, just think of like, I'm holding it up like people still have physical pictures, although I think probably you print stuff out occasionally. But you take vacation photos, and maybe you go back to them every 2 or 3 months. You want to feel good about that trip, and that sort of becomes your reality, and it becomes your story truth. Maybe you remember little was happening that day, but it becomes its own thing. If you look in the background, occasionally in a vacation photo, you're going to see other people, and you realize that moment, even if it wasn't involved in what you were doing, or maybe they were experiencing the same thing you were experiencing, it's in a totally different way. And they too have their own happening truth and story truth. Do you ever think about how many pictures you're in that you don't even know about? Like in the background, some family's photo, like you exist in this other reality. Now it's a little far out to think about this early in the morning, but anyway, I didn't have a problem right away with Beryl's story. For one thing, I was hungry and greedy, so she's just eating the food. Why shouldn't Beryl's version of the same event be different from my mother's? Beryl was strange in every way. Everything about it was slanted, seen from a new angle. It was my mother's version that held for a time. It absorbed Beryl's story, closed over it. But Beryl's story didn't vanish. It stayed sealed off for years, but it wasn't gone. It was like the knowledge of that hotel and dining room. I know about it now, and I didn't think of it as a place to go back to. Indeed, without Beryl's or Mr. Florence's money, I couldn't, but I knew it was there. Fascinating. Okay, so then this expands so well. So then it becomes this restaurant, right, that she can't get back into because she doesn't have the money to get into. So she knows it exists, but she can't get in there. Then the restaurant itself gets remodeled. Next time she goes there, it was after I was married. The Lions Club had a banquet and dance there. The man I had married, Dan Casey, was lying. You could get a drink there by that time. So the restaurant had changed. So now she can go back, but it's changed on the inside. So that's another change. Then the place was remodeled to the Hideaway, and now they have strippers every night, but Sunday. On Thursday nights, they have a male stripper. That's nice. I go there with people from the real estate office to celebrate birthdays at other big events. So it's great. It's like this place where she was, and that's where her memory was. She can't get back into for a while because you can't get taken there. I don't know. You never. I don't know if you appreciate it. I appreciate it more now, maybe as a parent, just how limited kids are in those places they get to go. Like you get to control that. So for them, it must, now of course can't go fucking anywhere. But a week ago, 3 weeks ago, or 3 months from now, whenever hopefully things get back to some sense of normal, take my kids to, like, say, the mall. Like, I could get in the car, on a dime and do that and take them. But to them, I mean, it's all riding on you. So you got that distance, and then you add money to it. That keeps her away from it. Then the fact that it changes with time, becomes something else, that too. And then it becomes a place like, again, they have strippers, which it's crazy. And that's what Munro's doing there, is she's treating these buildings like life. That's us. So it's really an extension of the metaphor that Tim O'Brien uses when he sees the picture of himself as a little boy and saying that, like, I'm still him, but he's sort of swallowed up in this body, only it's taken to the nth degree, and showing all those complexities therein and contradictions within that. She's using it. She's using buildings and the house they live in too, in this story as a way of doing that. I just think it's fantastic. Anyway, I mean, see, and you can see that too. I mean, just think about, I don't know, those of you who've lived in Lafayette, or think about your own hometown. Think about like different businesses that have become different things. My kid's favorite place to go to for a while was a place called Buybacks, and they sold old DVDs. And it used to be a video store before that. It was like a video store where you like rented things, DVD store where you rented things. And it shut down. They were sad. It got emptied out. But now they're putting a new front to it. And the boys are like, "Oh, is Buybacks coming back?" I'm like, no, that doesn't work like that. They don't just like shut down and open up the same thing. Or like where Toys R Us used to be, it's like Ollie's now. And these things sort of get swallowed up. But it's interesting enough just from a visual sense, but the way that Munro is able to translate it into a metaphor for how our lives work is something else. And we get the farm sold for $5,000 in 1965. Oh my God! And then it got turned into a commune at some point. These in the 60s, hippies come up and they decide they're going to live off the land. They don't really seem to know what the fuck they're doing, as was quite often the case. Commune disintegrated, the goats disappeared, the women moved to town to cut their hair. One time she got in there to be able to see it, and it was during the year that the house was empty and for sale. And I love that she's able to see a little glimpse of the cornflower wallpaper. And then she gets into this story with Bob Marks, who she's with, who gets trashy when he starts talking about, wonder if any of the people from the commune had sex there, and this sort of typical male bullshit thing. But she tells us something fairly shocking, that that her mom once burned up $3,000 in that very stove right there. And we're like, whoa. What do you mean? She threw in a check? No, it was bills. She did delivery. She went to town to the bank. She had them give them all to her, a shoebox. She brought it home, put it in the stove. She put in just a few bills at a time so it wouldn't make too big a blaze. My father stood and watched her. What are you talking about? I thought you were poor. We were very poor. So how come she had $3,000? That'd be like $30,000 today. It was her legacy. She got it from her father. Father died in Seattle and left her $3,000. She burned it up because she hated him. She didn't want his money. She hated him. That's a lot of hate. That isn't the point. Money is always the point. No, my father letting her do it is the point. To me, it is. My father stood and watched, and he never protested. If anybody tried to stop her, he would have protected her. I consider that love. Okay, now, we find out later on that never happened. She burned up the money, but the father certainly did not stand there and watch her. The father didn't even know she'd done it until it comes up with Beryl. This is an even bigger extension of the whole happening truth for story truth, and why something can be, sometimes nonfiction can't capture the truth that fiction can. And what she's done is she's turned, sort of processed and dramatized into this one moment, the love and protection that her father had for her mother, into this sort of fictional moment that, if you set down a video camera and recorded her mother and her father over the course of a day, you may not be able to capture. Again, this is happening truth versus story truth on steroids. People say that, but you get my point. Okay, so back to the 1947. On the car, the way home from the hotel, we said just as before, and Beryl starts talking about, do you mind me asking what you did with your money? Speaking of money, put mine in real estate in California. Never lose. I was thinking you could get an electric stove so you wouldn't have to bother with the fire in the summer. And then the father laughs. That's a good idea for us to get an electric stove, if we only had electricity. Oh, Lord. Beryl said, how stupid can I get? Anyway, we don't have the mother either. We don't have the money either, the mother said cheerfully. My mother said cheerfully, and she was continuing the joke. What do you mean? You wrote me you got it. You got the same as me. My father half turned to see, what money are you talking about? What's this money? So that tells us he doesn't know about this, even though the narrator has imagined this moment where the father watches the mother burning the money. She's even recounted it to Bob Marks from Daddy's will that you got last year. Maybe I shouldn't have asked. We didn't have to pay anything off. We didn't use it to pay anything off. I burned it. And she told how she went into town in the truck one day, almost a year ago, got all that money out. You burned up the money in the stove? You sound as if I burned up one of my children. And then this is the point where we talk about that betrayal. You know, one of the reasons that the narrator couldn't go to school is because they didn't have the money for it. And the mom takes it and does burn it up, you know, out of spite for the dad. So, you know, it's a tough pill to swallow. And the father defends her. It was her money barrel. Never mind, that's criminal. Criminals for when you call the police, Mr. Florence said. I love that Mr. Florence always has these lines that sort of keep people from things going too far and like in awkward situations. People sort of laugh. Don't pretend this isn't the craziest thing you've ever heard of. Don't pretend you don't think so, because it is. You think the same. Let me get this final passage. My father did not stand in the kitchen watching my mother feed the money into the flames. It wouldn't appear so. He did not know about it, seems fairly clear. Even if I remember everything, he did not know about it until that Sunday afternoon, Mr. Florence's Chrysler, when my mother told them all together. Why then can I see the scene so clearly, just as I described it to Bob Marks and to others? I see my father standing at the table, in the middle of the room, the table, the drawer. There's a box of money on the table. My mother's carefully dropping the bills in. She holds the stove lid, and my father standing by. It seems not to be just permitting her to do this, but protecting her. A solemn scene, but not crazy. People doing something that seems to them natural and necessary. At least one of them is doing what seems natural and necessary. The other believes the important things for that other person to be free to go ahead. They understand other people and might not think so. They do not care. That's love that husband is showing for that wife. How hard is it for me to believe I made that up? It seems so much the truth that it is the truth. It's what I believe about them. I haven't stopped believing it, but I have stopped telling that story. I never told it again after telling it to Bob Marks. I don't think so. I didn't stop because it wasn't strictly true. I stopped because I saw that I had to give up expecting people to see it the way that I saw it. I had to give up expecting them to approve any part of what was done. How could I even say I approved of it myself? If I had been the sort of person who approved of that, who could do it, I wouldn't have done all that I've done. Run away from home to work in a restaurant when I was 15, going to night school. So she ended up getting out. She ended up escaping. It wasn't because of the money, though. And the father protected the mother because he knows how much the mother really disliked her own father. My father wouldn't have died in the county home. My hair would be white, as it had been naturally for years, instead of the color called copper sunrise. Not one of these things I would change, not really if I could. I don't know if there's actually a hair color out there called copper sunrise, but it damn sure sounds like one that would exist. But I love that now we have the daughters dyeing her hair, or the narrator dyeing her hair, because the white hair reminds her of her mom in a way. And you see, like, you know, nothing like, you know, her mom and then her grandfather, but like there's still some, you know, sense of bitterness there. Yeah, is that right? Anyway, Bob Marks was a decent man. After I lashed out at him like that, he said, "You don't need to be tough on us." In a moment, he said, "Was this your room when you were a little girl?" He thought that was why I mentioned of such sexual shenanigans and upset me. And I thought it would be just as well to let him think that. I said, yes, it was my room when I was a little girl. It was just as well to make up right away. Moments of kindness and reconciliation are worth having, even if the parting has to come sooner or later. I wonder if those moments aren't more valued, more deliberately gone after, and the setup some people like myself have now than they were in those old marriages where love and grudges could be growing underground. So confused and stubborn, it must have seemed they had forever. Just an incredible ending. And that turn to where it connects both to her personal life and how she sort of lives her life now, and also like her parents, and the fact that it was what made her angry about Bob Marks making the joke in the house was how strongly she felt about her parents and her dad's love for her mom, and how her mom had sort of betrayed her in a way by burning that money. And I don't know, just powerful stuff. So for the among other things, I want your response on Moodle, but I would also like just some comments on that final paragraph, and especially that final line, moments of reconciliation being more valued, deliberately gone after in the setup some people like myself have now. meaning not married, dating, as opposed to those old marriages where love and grudges could be growing underground. What that means, again, it's that sense of the buried that we have, even with the house stuff. You know what? Scratch that. I want you to talk about whatever you want with this story on Moodle, because I haven't nearly covered enough. It's been almost a 50-minute lecture, and I feel like I could talk about this story another 3 or 4 weeks, just piece by piece. But we covered all the rooms, and I think that's the most important thing. So for the next lecture we're gonna have, I think I'm gonna post it this weekend. I've been just fell behind with the way that didn't get loaded the other day. We're gonna look at fits, so that will be posted sometime this weekend, and then I will have the list of the next 3 stories to read for next week posted on Moodle very soon. All right, have a good one.